Hello, and welcome to the Archetype Project. In today's episode, we delve into the myth of infinite performance and the psychological price of success. Surely you know that feeling of emptiness that arises after reaching a long-sought peak. It is the paradox of achievement. We use the figure of Elijah as a psychological case study to understand the collapse of high performance. He is not just a prophet, but the embodiment of the price we pay for absolute dedication. His fall after victory allows us to analyze post-success depression and the real limits of the human spirit in the face of extreme exhaustion. Without further ado, we begin. Visualize Elijah at the summit of Mount Carmel. He has just achieved an absolute victory over hundreds of rivals in a life or death challenge. At this moment, his mind experiences what psychologists call a flow state. It is a concentration so intense that time seems to stand still. His sympathetic nervous system is operating at maximum capacity. Adrenaline courses through his body, granting him an energy that seems superhuman. This phase of manic productivity is deceptive. When you achieve massive success, your ego expands, and a dangerous illusion of invincibility arises. You feel as though you can maintain this pace forever. For Elijah, the victory was a display of high performance under extreme pressure. He believes he is in total control of the situation and that his strength is inexhaustible. However, this peak performance conceals an inevitable biological price. The human body cannot sustain such high levels of stress indefinitely. What Elijah does not realize is that his greatest triumph is also the origin of his imminent collapse. The fall does not begin with an error or a failure. It begins right here at the highest point of his glory. Massive success leaves an invisible hangover. After the euphoria on the mountain, a message from Queen Jezebel arrives with a death threat. To an external observer, this seems contradictory. How can someone who defeated hundreds of rivals now fear just one person? The answer lies in the fragility of your identity after an extreme effort. Experts call this ego depletion. It is a process where your reserve of will and self-control is completely exhausted. In this state, any setback is perceived as an absolute catastrophe. Jezebel's threat acts as a psychological trigger that breaks your armor. Your momentum stops dead. This is the paradox of high performance. The higher you climb, the thinner the layer of emotional protection that remains at the end of the road. You become vulnerable at the exact moment you should feel strongest. What you experience is a disproportionate emotional response. You no longer reason with the logic of the winner, but with the fear of the survivor. Your ego, previously inflated by victory, becomes brittle. A single negative word is enough for the entire security structure to crumble. Elijah no longer feels like an invincible hero. He is a man whose mind has decided that the only option is to flee. Elijah's flight into the desert is not a simple physical journey, but a profound psychological regression. When the weight of expectations becomes unbearable, your social mask breaks. This mask, which in psychology we call the persona, is the image of success and strength that you project to others. Upon breaking, an impulsive desire for total isolation arises to hide the supposed shame of failure. The desert symbolizes that void where you are, no longer the leader nor the winner. In this state, of extreme exhaustion, the archetype of the death wish appears. You do not necessarily seek the end of life, but rather the immediate cessation of pain and responsibility. It is what many professionals experience as a longing to disappear or to have never existed. Your identity, previously linked to a grand mission, completely collapses. By losing your purpose, the survival instinct shuts down and you stop caring for your basic needs. You sit under the shade of a bush, surrendered, asking for everything to end. This is the darkest point of the collapse, when the glow of success goes out and only the deafening silence of a spirit that has surrendered remains. To understand your fall, we must look inside your brain. What you experience in the desert is a profound neurochemical collapse. During your previous success, your system operated with massive levels of dopamine and cortisol. Dopamine is the fuel of motivation, while cortisol keeps you on alert. However, the body has physical limits. After such an extreme effort, your chemical reserves are depleted. Science defines this state as post-achievement depression. It is a void that appears right after reaching an important goal. Many athletes or business people feel this collapse after achieving their greatest triumphs. When the stimulus of victory disappears, the brain suffers a sudden shock. This is the biological price of high performance. Your system cannot maintain a maximum intensity without suffering damage. The exhaustion you feel is not a lack of will. It is a defense mechanism of your organism. Your mind shuts down secondary processes to try to recover from a critical overload. What was once pure energy is now a need for silence and disconnection. After the total collapse in the desert, the intervention you receive is not a motivational speech or a new mission. It is something much more primal. In the account of Elijah, an angel appears to offer bread and water, simply ordering you to eat and sleep. From a clinical perspective, this represents mandatory physiological repair. When your nervous system is devastated, psychology must give way to biology. You cannot resolve an existential crisis if your brain lacks glucose or if your sleep cycles are broken. Here arises the true humility of high performance. You must accept that, despite your ambitions, you are still a biological organism with clear limits. Recovery does not begin with a spiritual epiphany, but with the act of nourishing oneself and resting deeply. Do you accept your own physical fragility? By allowing your body to recover first, you lay the foundations to rebuild your mind. Elijah does not get up immediately to continue fighting. He eats and goes back to sleep, recognizing that healing is a physical process before a mental one. Only after this biological rest will you be ready for the next step of the journey. After recovering your physical strength, you embark on a 40-day journey toward Mount Horeb. It is not a desperate flight, but a search for answers. Upon arriving, you take refuge in a cave. This closed and dark space symbolizes the total retreat from the outside world. In high performance, the cave represents the moment where activity stops and you face absolute silence. Without the noise of applause or the pressure of goals, the inner void emerges. It is a difficult phase because your identity was built on what you did, not on who you are. When you stop producing, you feel that you cease to exist. The cave forces you to look inward without distractions. Who are you when you are not achieving anything? This isolation is necessary to transition from action to essence. In stillness, the ego no longer has an audience to feed. You begin to seek a meaning that does not depend on external success. It is the space where a real transformation takes shape. Here, silence stops being a threat to become a teacher. While in the cave, you face a series of overwhelming phenomena. First, a rushing wind that splits the rocks. Then, an earthquake and a devastating fire. As a perfectionist, you tend to seek answers in such explosive events. You believe the solution to your crisis will come through a radical change or a new external challenge. However, meaning is not found in the roar. The noise only generates more distraction and fatigue. What truly transforms Elijah is a gentle, delicate whisper that emerges after the chaos. In psychology, this represents profound internal alignment. It is the moment you stop reacting to the environment to listen to your essential truth. That small voice is the intuition that exhaustion had silenced. It is not a war cry, but a frequency of absolute calm. Stillness is not a passive state, but the most powerful psychological tool you possess. Only when the external noise is completely silenced can you identify where your life should truly be headed. This subtle clarity is the beginning of your new mental structure. Upon leaving the cave, your return is not a homecoming to the old routine of isolation. The real transformation occurs when you understand that the model of the lone hero is unsustainable in the long term. Now, your mission is reindexed under a new structure based on collaboration. You are asked to designate one successor, Elisha, to share the burden that previously crushed you. This step symbolizes the transition from the warrior archetype to that of the mentor. By involving others in key roles, you cease to be the sole person responsible for absolute results. You understand that true strength does not reside in extreme self-sufficiency, but in the capacity to build a community. This is the definitive cure for chronic burnout and the feeling of isolation. Distributing the weight of your purpose allows you to integrate your shadow and recognize your biological limits without feeling guilt. You no longer need to be invincible to be valuable to the world. By accepting that others must continue the task, you transform your individual obsession into a shared legacy. You return to action with a healthier, more balanced, and above all, human vision of productivity. Elijah's lesson is not a relic of the past. It is a mirror of your own professional reality. Burnout never arrives all at once. It announces itself with small cracks in your daily enthusiasm. You must identify the exact moment when your passion becomes a suffocating obligation. The greatest risk occurs after a great triumph. As you learned at Carmel, success leaves you unprotected against criticism. Protect your energy after reaching each goal. Do not chain projects together without allowing your nervous system to regulate itself once more. Stillness is not a luxury. It is a necessary survival discipline. Scheduling spaces of absolute silence allows you to listen to your intuition. The noise of performance often drowns out this essential voice. Only from a place of calm will you evaluate if your direction remains aligned with your purpose. In the end, the sustainability of your mission depends on accepting your humanity. Elijah went from the fire to the silence to understand that no one is a solitary hero. Integrate rest as part of your success strategy. Transform your individual ambition today into a shared and lasting legacy. You have traveled the path from the collapse of success to the peace of silence. Understanding that your performance does not define your value is the first step toward a balanced life. The story of Elijah teaches us that rest and collaboration are strategic tools, not weaknesses. Apply these lessons in your own journey of personal mastery. If this analysis resonated with you, subscribe to explore more archetypes. Thank you for your valuable time. See you in the next search for meaning.